Early this morning, February 8th, 2021, an Idaho Falls police officer was involved in an officer-involved shooting. One person, an adult male, is deceased. No one else sustained any injuries in the incident. Before we share further information about the incident, Chief Johnson will share information about what happens from here regarding the investigation into the incident and what media and our community can expect moving forward. From there, we'll see if anyone has questions about the process, and then we'll move into the details of today's specific incident and what occurred, and we'll take further questions at the conclusion of the press conference. Chief Johnson.
Thank you. So we define an officer-involved shooting as any incident where, in the course of their duties, an officer discharges their service weapon, resulting in the death or injury of another person. There's a standard protocol for any officer-involved shooting. We immediately activate the Eastern Idaho Critical Incident Task Force, which responded to the scene to conduct the investigation. The task force has been established for many years and is designed to allow a thorough and expert investigation into the incident to occur that is independent from the involved agency. Investigators from multiple agencies typically participate in each investigation, with one agency acting as the lead investigative agency. In this case, the Idaho State Police will be acting as the lead investigative agency for this incident. For incidents that happen in Idaho Falls involving an IFPD officer, IFPD fully cooperates in these investigations. We normally don't participate in or conduct any part of the investigation. In this case, we did provide a Faro scanner, which is a 3D digital scanner. It's the only one on this side of the state. So we did provide that scanner and some personnel to document the scene, but that was under the direction and with the help of the state police. We were just there to help to provide that because there wasn't that capacity other than at IFPD. The incident is currently under investigation by the Critical Incident Task Force, and they are actively working to conduct the investigation. Because IFPD is not involved in the investigation, I cannot say how long this investigation will take. From past experience, I can tell you that it can take several weeks, but sometimes it takes several months, and we just can't control that. Once the investigation is completed, the case and results are sent to the Bonneville County prosecutor. The prosecutor will review the case and make a determination on whether the shooting was legally justified. This is the same process they follow in criminal cases that are brought to them by law enforcement. Separate from the prosecutor's process, IFPD also conducts an internal investigation of the incident once the Critical Incident Task Force investigation is complete. The purpose of the IFPD internal investigation is to ensure that all departmental policies and procedures were followed, and if the department's standard for discharging a service weapon was met. As part of the IFPD internal process, the department will impanel a use of force review board, which is made up of department personnel and community members. We recently confirmed 2 civilian members of that use of force review board, so that panel would be impaneled to review all the information and documentation of the case. The board will review all the information with regards to the case. The board will then make a recommendation to me about whether the department policies were followed. The board may also make other recommendations regarding department training and policies. Ultimately, it's my decision, final decision, to address whether or not the shooting occurred within the bounds of IFPD policy, if the department had provided the correct training, and if any change or disciplinary actions are needed. Again, this is separate from any decision made through the prosecutorial review. The entire process, all phases combined, again, can take several weeks to several months. It's designed and intended to be very thorough and independent in each stage. It allows for multiple, diverse, but informed perspectives. It is typically at the conclusion of all phases that IFPD and possibly the prosecutor may consider, if appropriate, to release any reports or videos of the incident or make additional public statements about the findings of the 2 investigations and any subsequent actions. So that's the general process for how these are investigated. Are there any questions about process of what happens from now going forward? I'd be happy to take questions about process now. All right, so the Idaho Falls Department, we have some core values, and one of those core values is integrity. And we define integrity as being honest and truthful at all times. Kind of talk about the bright light of day tests, that all decisions have to be made knowing that there will be public scrutiny and that everyone will know what we do. And we take that core value very seriously at IFPD of integrity, even if sometimes what we have to say can be difficult. And today, the truth that we have to share with you is difficult and quite tragic. Our intent in sharing information about the incident at this time is not to place blame or to necessarily explain what occurred. There are outstanding questions that we do not know the answers to. There's still an investigation to be done that, as explained earlier, we do not conduct in order to ensure that it is fair and impartial. We will only share information that we believe to be factually accurate as we know it at this time. Shortly after midnight, a Bonneville County Sheriff's deputy attempted to make a traffic stop on a vehicle traveling on First Street in Idaho Falls. The vehicle came to a stop on the corner of Lincoln Drive just off of First Street, and the driver fled from the vehicle on foot into a residential neighborhood. The deputy who initiated the stop broadcasted the direction the suspect had fled and a description of the suspect clothing, which included a black shirt. A number of Idaho Falls police officers and Bonneville County Sheriff's deputies entered the neighborhood to search for the suspect male. While searching the area, a resident on Holbrook told police officers that they had seen the suspect run through their yard and that they believed the suspect had a gun. The officer who spoke with the resident broadcasted the information to the other law enforcement personnel in the area searching for the suspect. Also, while searching the area, an Idaho Falls police officer spoke with a different resident on the corner of Lincoln Drive and Syringa Drive. The officer spoke briefly with the resident and informed him that the law enforcement officers were looking for a person that had fled from a traffic stop and that officers and deputies would be in the area for some time. During this time, law enforcement personnel were able to identify the suspect and found that he had multiple warrants for his arrest, including felony battery on an officer and 2 failure to appear warrants with original charges of resisting and obstructing arrest and providing false information to law enforcement. The suspect also had a history of violent interactions with law enforcement. A passenger had been in the suspect vehicle at the time the traffic stop was initiated and remained in the vehicle to speak with law enforcement. The passenger showed law enforcement personnel a message they had received from the suspect, sharing his GPS location with the passenger. Law enforcement personnel utilized this GPS location to determine the location of the suspect, which showed him to be in the backyard of a residence on the corner of Lincoln Drive and Syringa Drive. Linden Drive and Syringa Drive. Officers and deputies surrounded the residence and backyard in order to prevent the suspect from fleeing. Due to the information that the suspect may be armed and a prior history of violence when interacting with police officers, law enforcement personnel entered the location with their service weapons drawn. Officers heard yelling and approached the backyard where they encountered a man wearing a black shirt armed with a firearm. Officers gave instructions for the man to drop the gun. We do not currently have the answers as to what exactly occurred during these moments. We do know that during this interaction, an Idaho Falls police officer discharged his service weapon, firing 1 shot which struck the man. Officers attempted life-saving measures, but they were unsuccessful. Emergency medical personnel from the Idaho Falls Fire Department also responded and were also unable to provide any life-saving aid to the man. Ultimately, officers and deputies determined that the man that had been shot was not the suspect male, but was actually the resident of the address. I just want to make it clear that the person that was shot was not a suspect of any crime and was not the suspect that had fled and was not the suspect we were looking for. It was the homeowner, the resident that was in the house that had been talked to earlier. He'd gone out into the backyard with that gun, and that's where the officers met him, in that backyard. Shortly after the shot was fired, a deputy in the area reported seeing a man running through the area. Officers and deputies tracked this man to a nearby residence where he was found hiding in a shed in the backyard of the residence. This man was positively identified as a suspect male who ran from the traffic stop and was taken into custody. The traffic stop was initiated at approximately 12:03 a.m. The entire incident, including the search, various interactions described above, the shooting, and the arrest occurred within approximately 20 minutes. The Idaho Falls police officer who discharged his service weapon has been placed on administrative leave, which is our standard procedure per our policy. He was wearing a department-issued body camera, which was activated during the time period that the shooting occurred. This body camera footage, along with all other body camera or car camera footage from officers on scene during any part of the incident, is in the process of being given to the Eastern Idaho Critical Incident Task Force. At this time, IFPD will not be releasing the names of the individual involved. This is both to allow the Eastern Idaho Critical Task Force time to conduct necessary interviews with those involved, as well as to allow the family of the deceased time to make family notifications and begin the process that they need to occur. Earlier this morning through the day, I've spoken with the family of the deceased. They have asked that I convey their wishes to not be contacted by media at this time. They and I ask that their desire for privacy be respected. They're not words to express how heavy our hearts are today. The situation is devastatingly tragic for all involved. It's tragic for the deceased and his family and everyone who was involved. It's tragic for the officer that was in that situation and did what he thought he needed to do, and the officer's family. It's just tragic for everyone that was involved in this. We do want to express our thanks to the Idaho Falls Fire Department and Law Enforcement Chaplaincy of Idaho for responding to the incident and offering their support. We would also like to thank the Idaho State Police and investigators from other agencies who will be participating in the investigation, and trust that they'll do a very thorough and complete job. I don't have a lot of other detail. There's a lot of detail. I can talk a lot about process and try to clarify anything that was already in that release, but any other information or detail I simply do not have at this time. Are there any questions about that information? Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, so an officer spoke with a resident, and the resident said that the suspect had a weapon. That's correct?
That was a separate resident. So the suspect fled, was going through the neighborhood.
Okay.
One of the neighbors in that area saw the suspect as they were fleeing, told the officer that he'd seen the suspect and that he thought he was armed. The officer that got that information relayed that information via the radio. So all the officers were responding to what they were believing to be the suspect who had fled with warrants, who they thought was armed. The person encountered in the backyard was not that suspect. It was the homeowner or the resident of the house. Yes, ma'am.
Did we learn if was the suspect actually armed?
I do not have that information. I don't know what that suspect may or may not have had when they were detained. I have to believe that will come out in the detailed investigation, but I do not know at this time.
Was the suspect booked into jail?
Yes, the suspect was.
When can we expect an arraignment or an update?
For the suspect, I don't have any detail on that. That they were booked in on their warrants. I don't know if any additional charge will be filed. That would be a decision by the prosecutor. I just don't have that information.
When can you expect to get his name and photo?
The suspect that fled the scene? I think the Critical Incident Task Force may want to speak. That might be part of what they want to do. Those interviews usually take several days to complete those interviews. So we wouldn't be releasing any names until the Critical Incident Task Force has had a chance to conduct the interviews that they want to conduct. So we would not release any information until after the task force tells us they've talked to who they need to talk to.
Also, the traffic stop was initiated by a Bonneville County deputy, so the actual arrest of that individual was a Bonneville County Sheriff's Office arrest, and we would defer to them on those details.
How long will the officer in the process? How long are they on leave for again?
So the process can take several months. Sometimes we see it take 3-4 months. You've seen some of these take a long time. So the officer would not be back out working on the street until the entire process is completed. So that can take some time.
Do we know the relationship between the suspect and his passenger?
I do not have that information now.
And the actual shooting itself took place in a backyard, not like a garage or anything like that?
It was in the backyard, yes. It was the open air in the backyard.
And that was, just to double check, was Linden Drive, Mr. Rankin?
Correct.
Correct, yes.
So the house is not on Tendoy, it's on
I'm sorry. I'll verify the address. I believe it's in the 200 block of Tendoy. It's on the part of it.
Why was the stop initially occurred?
You know, I would only speculate on that. I know the person they were trying to stop had warrants, but I don't know. That'll have to come out as they complete an investigation.
Again, the stop was initiated by the Boston Sheriff's Office.
So again, yes.
You said you weren't releasing the names of the, I think, the suspect until the influence of task force. Is that impossible to include the name of the officer involved?
So there's just to be clear, there's a suspect who fled a traffic stop who had the warrants who we needed to catch. There was the person that was those names. As far as the deceased, the person that passed away, again, the family has asked that that name not be released right now, and they've asked that their privacy be respected. So I don't intend to release that name. The officer will go through their interview sometime in the next several days, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And we won't be releasing the suspect's information that fled the traffic stop. The Critical Incidents Task Force needs to do their investigation, and then we would either coordinate with the Sheriff's Office or work out a time in which that person would have their information released. That may come from the Sheriff's Office or it may come from us, I don't know.
Are you able to say how experienced the officer was that fired?
I don't have any information on that at this time, no. I just wanted to reiterate that this is a tough day, a tragic day. You know, the family, as you can imagine, is in our prayers and our heartfelt. I don't have words for it. Same thing with the officers involved. Sometimes everyone does what they think is right, and tragedies happen. So we would ask just a little patience for the investigation to be completed and all the details can come out. And I appreciate the time. Thank you.